Hey, this is Jeff with The Castle. Thanks for joining us again. Today I'm talking to Matt. Online he goes by BasicBon. I wanted to talk to him a little bit today about how he feels about streaming and Twitch as a platform, as a viewer, and how he feels about it now that he's returned as a streamer, and also a little bit about building his audience back up. After the interview, we see if Matt can handle the speedrun, our rapid-fire questions, and a great streaming tip from Zodiac Dread, one of the great streamers we interviewed on a previous episode of The Castle. So Matt, thanks for joining me today.
You're very welcome, Jeff. I'm excited to be here, and let's just dive right into it.
I mentioned that you had to take some time off from streaming. You and I talking earlier, you had said you didn't really have too substantial of an audience before you had to take your hiatus. When you were streaming before, was there a big difference in your approach?
I would say yes, largely because when I had previously streamed, I had sort of just done it as a fun time-killing activity. I was playing these games anyway, so I might as well have just, hopped on Twitch. Ironically enough, I'd only really returned to Twitch in any sort of consistent capacity, like early last year. Ironically, I think a couple weeks before we met, actually.
I think it was only a couple weeks before we met that I started watching you, or before you jumped into my stream.
Yeah, so it was like a random Sunday in March. We had connected on Twitter previously, and then I saw you were online, so I'm just like, yeah, I'll watch Jeff. I mean, I'm not really doing anything else. And then you were playing Prey at the time, and then we got to chat. And I think being in the same rough geographic location helped out quite a bit in sort of fostering our relationship, and we just took it from there. And now, like a year later, I'm on your chat. I'm super active in your Discord, and I'm back to streaming myself. So my initial approach was more like just, I'm doing this for fun. I'd be playing these games anyway. I might as well stream them, just see how it goes, see what happens, see what's interesting. This was interesting for me because I had way a long time ago streamed on Twitch, nowhere near as substantially normally, but I think my first stream was like 2015. And then I streamed some Hearthstone in 2017 before, again, technical issues kind of took me out of the game for a number of years. And then so I'm back in the town. I have access to a decent connection. I can get back on that horse a little bit and just, have some fun, see where it goes. So that was sort of my entry point back into the world of Twitch.
You had mentioned when you first started, it was just kind of, I'm playing something, I might as well jump online. Were you watching a lot of folks at that time? Was Twitch relatively or streaming relatively new to you, or were you someone that was watching other folks for a long time before that?
Streaming necessarily wasn't something that I'd been super into, if I'm being completely honest. I was well aware of, Justin TV and became Twitch and the use of the platform and what it was there for. But something like just, watching someone stream for a game for hours and hours wasn't really all that appealing to me. I found that either more structured content or just different kinds of content that I could kind of consume at my own pace were more my speed. When I kind of re-entered the workforce, so to speak, I did start to pay a bit more attention to, what was out there, who was around. A lot of the streamers I like these days are actually direct recommendations from other folks that I've followed. So it's kind of had this blossoming community effect where, okay, so I'm starting at this point, and then I watch a streamer that was recommended from another streamer, and then they recommend more streamers, and then they raid someone, and it's just like it grew from there.
Absolutely. I do the same, yeah. And when I very first started watching streaming, it was 100% because of Hearthstone, really. When I was into the game, I started watching some of the big names, and they would raid somebody, and maybe it was a little bit smaller, and then they would raid somebody who was a little bit smaller, and I kind of went down that chain until I found the smaller streamer level, and I don't have an interest in those bigger streamers anymore.
I would venture insofar to say that obviously the big streamers are very popular, they're very good at what they do, they make a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to find people that are fans of, Toast or Ninja or Dr. Disrespect, no matter where you go. They are the names that bring Twitch together. They are the names that people tune in for and the names that people want to see. But I think it's very limiting to think of them as these platforms as really only gateways to those kinds of bigger streamers. It's like, lack of a better example, but YouTube. YouTube has a lot of very prominent creators that have gotten famous over the years for various reasons, but they all had to start somewhere, and they've all had to slowly build up their audience over time. A streamer that I notice around quite a bit often now is Moist Critical, and Charlie, I've been a big fan of his content for a long time, but I mean, he was making YouTube videos like 10 and 11 years ago, and just keeping at it, just building and building until he is where he is today.
just kind of plugging at it and plugging at it
Yeah,
then, eh?
just never giving up, just keeping at it a couple times a week or every day, or just, you gotta organically build it up.
So are you still watching a lot of stuff, more authored content, like on YouTube and that sort of thing? Or do you find that most of your time is going to Twitch now?
A large portion of my time now does go to Twitch because there are people I just, I want to keep tabs on, that I want to keep up with. Folks like Roxas Oath, Ashradizia, you,
Yep.
Wandering Pilgrim, Zodiac Dread, the gang, the core group.
Yeah, right.
Also, over time, everyone's tastes change. I used to be a really big fan of Moisture Cool. He is Penguin Zero on YouTube. Over time, just there was a bit of a disconnect for me in his non-gaming content. I used to be super into watching Dashi games, and I still will on occasion, but not as frequently. Right now, a lot of the content I consume on YouTube is probably like Video Game Donkey or Darkmane or Super Eye Patch Wolf, but not really anywhere near as consistently as I used to. Like, I don't feel the need to watch every video that gets put out. I found that a lot of the longer form content, like the full game playthroughs, I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm still interested in watching those, or even like series. It's just like mainly more structured videos is my thing now, or has been in recent years. I was super into folks like Markiplier or Jacksepticeye, as was everyone for a time, but my preferences, my sensibilities kind of moved me away from folks like that. Not that they're not still awesome content creators, but I just found that over time they became not so much for me. There has been kind of a migration or a diversification away from YouTube for me towards Twitch. Twitch, I find, has a lot of more interesting things, more variety. For example, if not for Zodiac Dread or Abe Lincoln, I never would have discovered, like, oh shit, Kaizo's a really cool thing. How did I not ever know about this before?
No, I'm totally with you.
Yeah.
I would never watch that stuff on YouTube. With Dread especially, like when I started watching him, he was doing Super Mario 3 speedruns. I can't imagine sitting down to a YouTube video and watching that, but watching him do it, or watching, I think Abe used to do that, I can't remember. Anyway, watching them do it, it's 1,000 times more interesting, because I can talk with them.
Yeah, and even just on the periphery of something like Games on Quick, it's really cool to watch after the fact, but to be there in the moment and to kind of experience the trials and tribulations of, okay, this is what this run actually looks like, and this is how it's done in real time, with the chat and the audience.
Yeah. Here's what it looks like when they practice, and here's what it looks like when they fuck up.
Yeah, so bad example, the last GDQ, the control run, they were working on this one particular trick called Slidey McGunny, and they gave everything in this run just ridiculous names. But they couldn't pull it off, they tried over and over, and when they finally pulled it off, everyone was super hyped, super excited.
Oh, yeah.
It brought the run together.
Right, yeah, it's like a community thing. That's very cool. I obviously didn't watch the control run yet because I've got that game coming up over the next couple weeks, but I'm excited to see it after the fact. How long was the run?
It was like sub-hour, I think, maybe a little over.
No.
Yeah, seriously.
Oh, God.
It involves getting out of bounds, which is not something you can do in the normal game. Well, that's how we do that, I guess.
So I know that, you had that time off where you weren't able to stream because of technical issues. So you were spending a lot more time as an audience member rather than creating. How do you feel about streaming platforms? You had mentioned YouTube and you're kind of moving towards Twitch. Have you spent any time with Mixer at all?
I haven't. I know that it has its audience and it is a growing platform. They have Ninja now, which is going to attract people a huge amount. I could be streaming the Mixer from my Xbox One, but it would be a lot easier for me to do so than trying to navigate, the nightmare that OBS sometimes is.
Right.
I think there's going to be room in the streaming market for multiple platforms. I think the real challenge going forward is going to be, how are these platforms monetized? How are these companies making money? It shouldn't be a surprise, and it's no secret that YouTube costs Google money, and it has very little revenue, if any. Same with Twitch and Amazon. Twitch has commercials, and there are subs, and there are monetization options, but at the end of the day, it's still a huge loss leader. Amazon and Google, I mean, if there are any two companies that can take the hit, it's them. But
You're right.
I think one of the more interesting things from a business sense going forward is going to be, okay, so we have this platform for streaming. How are we going to ensure that, regardless of the health of the parent company or its status, how can we make sure that this actually is profitable? Because the best ideas aren't necessarily the ones that provide the best service or the most features. It's the ones that can actually build up a decent base and make enough money to stick around and move on to the next thing. I use this example, and I am a total marketing nerd for using it because that is what I do for a living. There was a social network in early 2016 called Peach. It was the rage of CES that year, and it came out in January.
I don't know if I'm familiar.
I would recommend everyone look it up because it's a great example of a wonderful product that just completely floundered. It had an excellent onboarding experience, but in terms of actually like retaining users and being used and making money, it was bad. It went down. I feel like one of the creators of Vine was behind it. Vine was very popular and very successful up to a point where until they were bought by Twitter, and then Twitter shut them down. So it doesn't really affect us or our day-to-day lives in the streaming community, but it's interesting, and I think it's a good thing to keep in the back of your head, these machinations of these larger companies. If Amazon makes a change, how's that going to affect Twitch? If Google makes a change, how's that going to affect YouTube? Right now, with the pandemic going on, YouTube's review policies have gotten a lot more lax because there's obviously not enough people to go through them. So there's going to be a lot of like false content claims, a lot of disputes. Some videos that are completely free and in the clear are going to get like false content strikes, and then they're going to be demonetized for X number of days or weeks or however long this lasts. And it's interesting because content creators kind of depend on that revenue. And it's kind of this, double-edged sword where you want to create the best content you can, and you have to be really smart about how you do it. But at the same time, there are things that can happen that are entirely out of your hands that affect how you make a living with what you do.
I mean, you would mention that, right now we're kind of in the early stages of this COVID-19 situation. So by the time this episode comes out, I have no idea where things are going to stand, but it is sort of changing the way the world is working. Given that it's so different right now, like, have you noticed a big difference since before your hiatus? Has there been a big difference between then and now?
I would not necessarily say that there's been a big difference insofar as the behind the scenes goes, or really just, normal day-to-day streaming life on Twitch. In terms of what I've noticed has changed since before I had to take my hiatus, it's a really minor quibble of mine and has nothing to do with any behind the scenes of the big companies or any of their financial machinations or what have it. But I know it's a wonderful system that has helped streamers for years, and I have nothing against it personally. I noticed that pretty much every streamer at every level is using Streamlabs or Streamlabs OBS.
Yes.
And they're not really customizing it. They're just, changing the text locations, changing some of the images, maybe putting some sounds in, and that's it. And I mean, it irks me a bit, not necessarily because I think people should change what works for them or take steps to complicate their setup, but because it's almost like stock or default. Not having alerts might be more novel or interesting to an audience than relying on Streamlabs simply because, it's so vast and everyone uses it.
You're getting dangerously close to talking shit about my sound alerts here, and I'm not going to have
I'm never going to talk shit about your sound alerts. I'm just saying, if you have filet mignon for dinner every night, eventually you're just going to want a hamburger.
So it sounds like rather than noticing a lot of differences over the time, you're more frustrated that there hasn't been more.
I'm more frustrated, I guess, that there are a bunch of streamers with wonderful personalities and things that they're honestly working on or trying to do to diversify their streams. It's just all wrapped up in this very similar seeming package because of the way they do their alerts, the format in which they run their streams.
So when you're in that time, you're off on hiatus, you can't really stream, you're watching a lot of folks. Was that driving you nuts? Like, did you want to get on and be like, look, here's the interesting things we can try? I know you were pushing me to do different things with my stream at the time. Was that a frustrating period for you then?
I wouldn't necessarily say that time I had to sit out was a frustrating period myself, because realistically, taking that break was the best thing I could have done.
Yeah.
It allowed me to get more involved in the community. As you say, checking some folks that had been sort of on my periphery that I hadn't really given much thought to or didn't think that they would be for me. For example, I watched Zodiac Red play Death Stranding, which is not something that he would usually play, but I loved that playthrough, and I had a great time watching him all, like 35 hours I was in there or something.
Great playthrough, yeah.
But by watching people who had been at it longer, it helped me better recognize what my strengths and weaknesses are and were as a streamer. So, for example, back last year, I was streaming pretty much exclusively Apex Legends, which is a game I still like, but, not for everyone, let's just say. And I wasn't really talking anywhere near as much as I should be. People come to a stream for a bunch of different kinds of reasons. Sometimes they want to learn about a game, they want to see a game in action, they want to be entertained. but it ultimately, some part of whether or not they stay falls on you as the streamer. And I wasn't really being as proactive as I could have been and trying to engage people in holding conversations. I also feel like because I somewhat gotten into public speaking at the time, that even if I was talking to no one, and there were a lot of times I was talking to no one, that's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
Getting that practice and just verbalizing my thoughts and speaking out loud helped me not only work on my public speaking, and also I had quite an extensive career in broadcasting before I started with Twitch, but also to kind of put my thoughts into an order or try to verbalize them where they didn't just sound like completely random and rambling. Because if there's one thing I'm really good at doing, as this interview is showing you, it's rambling. All right, we're doing this. Doppio, this is Snow. He is a cinnamon bun. He likes two things in life: his wife Sarah and punching things. He takes a lot of damage. He takes a lot of hits. He's a goofball. Look at that face. How can you say no to that face?
Yeah, but that's what you're good at, though, man. That's what people show up for.
I don't even know where to start with that.
No, but I would say you get a good sense of humor, you got something to say about everything. I'm with you that if I go into a channel, if somebody's not talking and they're not engaging, even if chat's dead, I mean, it's an immediate turnoff. I'm probably going to leave that channel. I would imagine it's probably similar for you, or it is for most folks that I talk to. If you come into somebody's channel and they don't have a huge number of viewers at that time, like, what's keeping you there?
So, something I personally need to work on is that I'm not super involved in seeking out streamers. As I said earlier, a lot of the streamers I follow have been recommendations from other folks. So I do need to get better at like going through Twitch, however that might be, and looking for folks that I can follow that are playing games I am interested in or might be interested in, or just throwing something against the wall and seeing what sticks. A large part of my personal preference is that I'll come in to see a particular streamer and not necessarily what they're playing.
Yeah, right.
But I completely understand it can be, the worst, just deadening and frustrating and soul crushing to talk into the void, to have a conversation that no one's going to hear. That's kind of the reality of streaming. You can't control who clicks in your channel and when they're going to do it. So when I come into a stream and I'm not familiar with the person, I find that being welcoming is really important. Not just acknowledging that you're there, but like trying to engage you in conversation. Back in October, you had someone raid you when you were playing Alan Wake, and they hadn't followed your channel, and they just popped in because they loved the game, and they brought like their audience of like 700 people with them. And they were like, "Oh my god, this game's so amazing! How do you feel about it?" Just like creating that kind of dialogue about the game, because the reason they're coming to you is because they're interested in the game, but it's the streamer that's going to keep them around and keep them involved and motivated and interested. That can also fall to chat as well, although it's kind of variable. Folks like Marcus Adveran are an inspiration to me because he's really great at being so inclusive, talking to people, cracking jokes, and really just making sure everyone's having a good time.
Every channel that I see him in, he's always pumping people up, keeping the conversation going. People like that make a big difference. They do in my channel anyway.
For sure, and I wanted to give Marcus a shout out specifically because even though he's stretched thin over probably dozens of streamers, he'll always make the time to come in and just like brighten everyone's day. He is, without being a streamer himself, he's probably one of the hardest working people I know. And it's always good to see him around and talk with him. And at this point, it's pretty much an everyday thing. But I don't feel that a lot of streamers, a lot of channels could succeed unless their communities were as welcoming as Marcus was. If people in the chat who are familiar didn't try to make it, a cool place to hang out and just dispense with, the drama and whatever random bullshit there is to just have fun. Because no matter whether, a person's coming in to find out about a game or be entertained, they're coming in to have fun. And the best thing chat can do, and what chat often does, is just make sure that they have fun. Of course, sometimes you're going to get trolls. Here's a recent example. So I had a guy come into one of my Resident Evil 7 streams and he just started talking shit, and I didn't ban him or block him, whatever. He just left of his own accord. Sometimes you're going to get trolls. Twitch is a massive platform with so many people on it, so you really can't let that color your experience, or at least at this smaller level.
I just haven't had a problem with trolls yet. I've seen them in other channels, and I remember the incident that you're talking about there. But even then, I think you handled it pretty gracefully. You didn't make a big deal about it, but you didn't give them much regard either, so they just kind of took off because it wasn't doing anything for them.
The worst thing you can do is feed the trolls, right?
Yeah, man, but I'm bad at that. I do want to go back because I kind of got off track there, but you've really encouraged me to try different things. I've been working on my deep dive series and tried switching things around with what games I play when and that sort of thing. You changing your format around is something that you played around with quite a bit. You've got this After Dark series that you do on Saturday nights, which has been really great. You've got some specific follower goals. It seems like this is kind of a calculated approach. Maybe calculated is too harsh a word, but it seems like it's a planned approach anyway. Am I accurate with that?
It was planned up into a point. After Dark did actually have a brief run about mid last year where I thought it would be super cool to put aside an hour or so at midnight on Saturday to play these weird, odd, unconventional games or scary indie games or
Yeah.
what have you. It didn't last long. I actually only ended up doing about two slots for Skatebird and one late night. And the reason I had stopped it back then was because, honestly, I was a human being and I found it difficult to consistently stay awake or even want to stream at
Yeah,
midnight.
right.
So when I brought the block back recently, I bumped it a few hours ahead, so 10 p.m. seems a lot more manageable, and to date, I think I've missed one because I just fell asleep. And it happens. You're not going to be perfect all the time. You got to let yourself be a person first. In terms of the follower game goals, yes and no, it's more calculated because my approach to streaming this year is different than it had been last year. As I said last year, I'm just like, oh, I'm just doing it for
Mhm.
fun. I'm going to be playing these games anyway. We'll just see what happens. I've tried to be more controlled in my approach in that I'll still play games for fun and also stream them for fun, but I want to have fun building a community and seeing what other people are like and being more inviting and helping contribute to people having more fun on Twitch in general, whether that's folks coming from anyone else's chat or folks that are totally new to the platform. Everyone has to start somewhere, and while everything I did last year was like great practice, that's sort of how I thought of it. It was
Right.
practice. So this is the real deal now. Long story short, in terms of my game follower goals, it's more an attempt on my part to involve my community in the diversity of my content. When I streamed last year, it was mainly, Apex Legends, or even since I've been back, there's been a lot of teamfight tactics as well. And while these are, fun and interesting games that I enjoy playing, I understand and respect that they might not be everyone's cup of tea. So if the community wants to see me tackle the Celeste DLC or jump right into Final Fantasy 13 2 when I'm finished with 13, I'll do it. These aren't things that I would have any problem with doing. These aren't things that if I don't reach an incentive, I'm not going to do in the future. It's just a matter of timing and trying to involve people more in what they want to see because at the end of the day, they are watching the content I put out.
That's a very good point, and I've talked with you about how I play a shitload of Rocket League offline. I play a ton of TFT. My competitive games I save for offline because I don't really think they're not really what I'm doing when I'm online. It's not really what my streaming channel is.
And that's fair, but at the same time, you need to kind of build in that laterality for yourself. So, for example, I've recently been playing some Apex on stream, even though it's not baked into my schedule. I like the flexibility. It's a game that I've played to death, and people more or less know what they're going to expect. I think I've won on stream twice. I'm not great at it, but I love it to death, and I'm pretty good with a shotgun.
You're decent
I'm,
with
I'm
it, yeah,
decent
for
with a
sure.
shotgun, but I don't want to cut off my nose to spite my face. I don't want people to think, oh, this is all I'm going to get here, or this was cool. I want to see more of this. Oh, it's not on the schedule. It'll just come up whenever. So it is that kind of balance for me between, okay, so right now I'm playing through Final Fantasy 13. I'm doing a 10-year anniversary playthrough of it. It's a game I love to death, but I haven't played in like 8 years. For the longest time, I couldn't play 360 games because of various technical issues. Playing has been a blast, but I want people to understand that, this isn't all that's on the menu. Things can be a lot more diverse, and really it's up to you how diverse they can be. So whether it's, playing TFT with you on stream like we did recently, or it's playing Apex just like at random times, Friday nights and Saturdays, or however it shakes out, playing some other random games. Recently, I played Street Fighter Cross Tekken because Sunclutch was interested in watching me play it, and then I finished off Hitman 2, which is something I started forever ago. It's not that I necessarily want to keep people on their feet, but I want them to feel like, it's not just one thing. And for a lot of streamers, I think that's kind of an issue where it devolves into being just one thing. As I said, you can't do the same thing over and over again forever, and you can't expect people to be happy if you do the same thing over and over forever, even if you're really great at it. I'll use an example of Overwatch. people are going to watch Overwatch and they're going to want to support the creators, but maybe they're not going to want to watch those creators play Overwatch all the time. So a couple folks I know have kind of diversified their game approaches. They'll just play whatever is interesting to them or whatever sticks, because it's not so much the game they're playing, it's the fact that they're streaming. And I think that's a good approach to take. It's very much my approach in that when I look for a streamer, it's not necessarily the game they're playing, it's that they're online. So you could be playing Sekiro or Rocket League or whatever. Because you're you, I'm going to follow you.
I feel the same as you, and I think that might be true with the kind of folks that we follow at our level, at that kind of affiliate level. I'm very much more there for the folks, for the person, the streamer, than I am for the game. I don't know if that pans out at the higher level, though. I know that lots of folks say that having one game that you stick with seems to be the one that's going to get consistent numbers. I mean, I know it's a totally different game, though. We're talking about someone at the partner level. Their strategy is going to be a lot different than someone at our level.
That's true, and also, this is somewhat historical because obviously he's no longer on the platform, but even Toast, when he was super into playing Hearthstone, he still made time for other games. He played Fortnite, he did other stuff. Everyone eventually will want to step away. Brian Kibler, he'll still play other things on stream. He'll play Magic the Gathering, he'll play Teamfight Tactics. They will, to some degree, diversify what's on stream, even if they're known for one game or being really good at one particular game. People like Hafu and Dog will flip between Hearthstone Battlegrounds and TFT. So you kind of need that laterality. You can't expect yourself to want to play the same thing every day. And to a certain extent, I think the audience knows that. I think that, like we said, it's about the personalities. Streamers, they need breaks. They're human people. You got to expect that if I'm super into a Hearthstone streamer or a TFT streamer, it's not going to be that all the time and forever. Tactical golf action. Amazing. Truly incredible. Solid move.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's interesting talking to you about this, about what's going to keep folks around or that sort of thing. You had mentioned earlier that professionally your background is marketing. When you're looking at your own stream, how do you measure metrics when we're at the affiliate level? What kind of strategy or tools do you use?
I'll concede that I probably spend way too much time in Twitch's creators dashboard, just looking at stats and metrics and gauging how good one game might be versus another, or a time slot versus another time slot. I recall I did a stream that since I came back, it was a Tuesday afternoon. I was playing TFT for like 3 hours, and I averaged something like 0.3 viewers, and that wasn't exactly a good stream on my behalf. Even if I had some really great games, even if I was communicative and welcoming, it's not what you want to see. It's kind of deflating to experience that. So I don't necessarily think it's an issue now, but I'd be a little bit more hesitant to stream on weekday afternoons in the future. There's always a lesson that you can learn from everything you've done, but you also have to make sure you don't get too much into the weeds where data is concerned, because if you rely too much on the data, you're going to try to optimize too much and then lose and forget the reason you're doing this in the first place. It's a very fine line, and it happens in marketing all the time, this idea of analysis paralysis, where there are so many different things where you could pay attention to. My average chat messages was higher this stream, so maybe I should do this more. Or I told this story and I got a great response from chat and I got a couple subs off it. Maybe I should try telling more stories and see how that works out. But then, it doesn't work out. Maybe it's just a fluke. So there are certain things you can do or think about doing to play the data game, but at the end of the day, it's all just numbers. The way the internet works and really Twitch is that you can't really account for anything because you never know who's going to click into your stream or when, and there's a certain degree of randomness that pervades everything that you're not going to be able to analyze your way around. People are always going to come to your stream at different times, on different days, and they're going to be different people. So what works really well for a group on a day at a time might be very context specific. When you're looking at the data for the stream, this is a cool thing that happened, or this was a good spot here. It's not necessarily good to replicate. It's just good to keep in mind, that certain things work at certain times, or you might be willing to try something again. But at the end of the day, you just got to be yourself and keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I've talked to folks about getting lost in that viewer count when you see that, that little red icon and it's got a 1 or a 2 and you're going, man, I really should have a 5 or a 6 there, or a 10 or a 20. I think it affects the quality of my stream when I get lost in my head that way.
It is deflating. I had a Hearthstone stream recently where it just didn't do the viewership that I was expecting, and I was disappointed by that. I honestly was. I thought that, the content had come out that day and that there would be more interesting, but there's always that risk of when you play bigger name games or there's a big new content drop that people aren't going to go to what they know more established streamers. They're not just going to want to play it themselves, or they'll be doing that at the time. So there's like 100 or 1,000 different variables that you have to account for. You're never going to be able to account for them all. Just stick with what you know, build what you know. You'll get there eventually. Consistency is what wins out in the end. You can't optimize for consistency.
With your after hours show, the one on Saturday nights, I'm a really big fan of it, and I think it's a really neat setup that you've got, and you advertise for it, and you talk about it, and kind of get a little bit of a hype going. You tend to stream games that you don't normally stream throughout the rest of the week. How do you pick the games that you want to play for that show?
As I've said, After Dark is meant to be a block to showcase some games that are offbeat or different or unique or unconventional or out there or weird or scary or what have you. A lot of it comes down to my personal preference, so games I already have or I feel would make really interesting sort of one-offs. Some of the best games I've played in recent memory have been After Dark games, whether that was Stories Untold, this horror text adventure, not really what you would expect to ever see on Twitch, or Wide Ocean Big Jacket, which was a really sweet narrative look at relationships that was like watching a movie with chat.
Yeah, that's true. That was a little bit less interactive than I was expecting, but it was such a cool experience, and it was contained.
I think people in general are kind of scared off those dialogue-heavy experiences because that means that there's, a lot of dedication to reading, maybe not so much interacting with chat, but it absolutely can be done.
Totally agree. I think you've made some great choices there. Can I ask you to get a sneak peek of something that's coming up?
I don't know if it will be happening by the time this episode airs, but 2 upcoming games include John Wick Hex.
Oh yes, that's right. I remember you talking about
When
that.
you think of John Wick, you'd probably expect like a shooter, like a first-person shooter. And when I went through the Google reviews for this game, everyone's like, "Oh, this isn't a John Wick game. I want to be John Wick. I want to have the gun. I want to go out. I want to kill people." It's a strategy game. It's a top-down isometric strategy game. That's really neat for me to see them take that IP and make that approach. So it's not what you would expect when it comes to John Wick. It's not what you would expect probably when it comes to most licensed games. But they did it, and it's been out for a while, and I'm stoked to dig into it. Another one is Undertow, which is this kind of undersea capture the flag game, which was a really sort of early Xbox Live Arcade title. I haven't played it in a number of years, but I'm really excited to get back to it because it's different. It's not what you would expect.
Awesome. I can't wait to see those. And I just want to say thanks again for joining me today. I know that you stream a few nights a week. Saturday nights is the big After Dark show. Twitch channel is BasicBon. Are you good to stick around and do the speedrun with me?
Let's do it.
Thanks again to Matt for joining me. Catch his show After Dark every Saturday night on his Twitch channel. And just to clarify, he's won more than 2 games of Apex Online at this point. But not too many more. Coming up after the speedrun, we got a great streaming tip from Zodiac Dread.
Almost out of time.
Alright, Matt, you ready for the speedrun?
Let's do it.
I got 10 questions here. I want your fastest answers, just whatever comes off the top of your head. Don't take too much time.
You can always edit it to make it faster.
Alright, here we go. Alright, who is the worst Apex hero?
Gibraltar.
Okay. What's the most underrated 90s song?
Come
on. You gotta give me something.
The decade in which I was born, it's not...
What's the...
fuck.
Too late. No, you're done. What's the best candy bar?
Reese's Peanut Butter Cups.
Okay, that's a good answer then. What's your favorite Halloween costume from when you were a kid?
When I was 3, I went as the Red Power Ranger.
Did you really?
I did, yeah.
Oh my god. Do you have a picture?
No. The cell phones weren't around then.
This is fair, yeah, right? What's the most frightening game that you've ever played?
I don't generally get scared by horror games, but I'm gonna have to say Resident Evil 7. Just the atmosphere of it was amazing.
You've been playing that it's bonkers. Anyway, what is... Okay, Battle Royales. Do you think it's a flash in the pan, or are they here to stay?
It's hard to say because I've been very vocal about I'm not sure this is for me, I don't think this is gonna stick around. It's stayed around a bit longer than I thought it would, but eventually I think it's gonna turn out like MOBAs where there's just like the main 1 or 2 and then other competitors are kind of just gonna scale off.
That's far better thought out than I was looking for here. What's the console with the best controller?
I'm gonna have to go with the Xbox just because I've been using it for 10 years. I know what I'm getting into. I know that the design has changed relative to the PlayStation controller, but for my money, Xbox it is.
You talking about like 360, Xbox One? Like, which one feels best?
They're both pretty similar, and considering I have them both right now in my hands, yeah, they're pretty much identical as far as feel goes.
What's your favorite hero from Set 3 in TFT?
Gonna have to go with Kale. She's been amazing so far.
Which one's Kale?
She's the 4-cost angel who is a Valkyrie and does massive damage.
Yeah.
I put Infinity Edge on her one game and it was bonkers how much damage she did.
You jerk. What's the best fast food?
A&W, by far.
What? I thought... Alright, never mind. I thought you were gonna say what's it called? The Farmer's Breakfast or whatever?
Oh, yeah, no, fuck that.
From Tim's? Oh, okay. A&W, I didn't expect that at all. What is the hardest fighting game that you played?
From a technical perspective, probably King of Fighters, although Tekken is also very difficult.
Alright, Matt, what's the most underrated 90s song?
Long View by Green Day. There is none better.
Oh my god, that's underrated?
Underrated.
Longview is underrated?
Longview is underrated. People always think about, when I come around, they think about Basket Case, they think about Minority. Longview never gets any love.
I'm sorry, Matt. I have to say you failed the speedrun.
I don't think so.
But I appreciate you playing.
And now a quick tip about streaming.
Especially when you're starting out streaming or a newer streamer, don't focus on the numbers. I know it's easy because they're right there and you can get caught up into them. But in my experience, if you just turn off the numbers, don't worry about it, and just have fun with your stream, it serves you better. You're more relaxed and more genuine. So yeah, just turn off your numbers and relax and have fun.